Hi and welcome to this week's Happy Hour, coming to you this week on a Saturday rather than a Friday. Now, I could have got something out to you yesterday. It would have been very rushed, wouldn't have been very well thought through. And given that I'm talking about self-compassion today, it didn't feel very authentic either. To be writing myself so hard to put out something that I didn't feel was worthwhile. So I gave myself some compassion and we're having a Saturday real life happy hour. Now, we're coming into Valentine's Day next week. And while Valentine's Day is seen generally as a celebration of romantic love, it can be a time when we can sort of step back and reflect more broadly on love in our lives. So things like Galentine's on the 13th, which is a celebration of friendship, but also just looking at all of the relationships in our life, whether that's family or friends or our pets, but just all the places where we experience love. It can be a really nice thing to do, even if you're not thinking about romantic love. And so for the next couple of weeks leading into the Lunar New Year, and Valentine's Day, I want to talk about self-love, which can be probably the hardest type of love. But it is the most important relationship that we'll ever have in our life, is the relationship that we have with ourselves. Now, you may have heard a quote that goes something like, "You can't love someone else until you learn to love yourself." Now, I find this one a little bit problematic because it is very black and white. It doesn't have a lot of nuance, and it doesn't ring true, I think, for a lot of people who maybe struggle with self-love but feel like they do have love for others. And it has a very it almost stacks on the blame. So if you are already feeling bad about yourself and struggling with self-worth and self-love, and then to find out, it means that you can't love others because you don't love yourself. It almost will just make people feel worse. So I prefer, there's a similar, but I think fundamentally different phrase, which covers the same idea, but in a better way. And that is, you can only truly love others to the extent that you are able to love yourself. And that's more nuanced, in that it doesn't say that we don't love others. It just says that the amount that we can be open and love others is affected by the changing amount that we love ourselves. And that rings a bit more true, in that we need to have a good relationship with ourselves to fully express our love towards others. And that we will still express love, but it just may not be to the same extent if we don't have that underlying feeling of love of ourselves. And so, for example, say you've had one of those mornings where everything seems to have gone wrong. You spilled coffee on yourself. You forgot that you had a really important meeting at work and you're going to be late for it. Everyone's running late. You've got to get the kids to school. They're going to be late. And now you're stuck in traffic. In this moment, how much compassion are you going to have for the person in front of you in traffic? Probably not much. And also, how much love is going to spill out if your partner or your kids or someone asks you for something in that moment? Probably not a lot, because you already have been critical of yourself. You're in an awful mood because you've blamed yourself for getting into that situation, and you're not going to have the capacity to be kind and be compassionate and loving when you feel so bad about yourself and you're in such a rush. And you can feel the difference in that kind of moment, even just remembering a moment like that. Feel into what your heart feels like in that kind of situation. Is it open and expanded and, and flowing out with love? Or is it constricted and closed and unyielding? And that probably feels truer. And we can't express love and we can't feel love for others when our heart is closed and constricted and tight. It's just not possible. And so that's what I think that phrase or that quote is relating to. We need to be kind and compassionate to ourselves, because that's when we can open our heart and truly love ourselves. And that building of that relationship and that self-love for ourselves, it's hard. It's not easy. It's something that we don't feel, most of us, particularly comfortable in doing. And it changes over time. So you imagine when you're a baby or a young child, or if you've seen, come into contact with a baby or a young child, they are super open and loving. They are also really comfortable in their own skin. They're happy to be exactly who they are, and they are confident in their own lovability. Like, young children just know that they are awesome and they deserve to be loved, and they love accordingly. Like, that is big love. If you've ever been loved by a small child, whether it's a friend or a family member, they love big. It's because their hearts are really open and they love themselves. And then through experience and growing up and relationships with peers and family and other people, we begin to doubt that lovability. We question whether or not who we truly are is acceptable, is okay, is lovable. And we start to play small. We change who we are to try and be more like what we think people want us to be, how we think we should be, based on other people, rather than truly inhabiting who we are. And so I would say it's the work of the rest of our lifetime to then come back to that relationship to ourselves and rebuild that relationship with ourselves to the point where we can love ourselves open and unconditionally as we truly are, not the person we pretend to be acceptable and palatable to others. And that's big work. That's a lifetime of work. And so it can seem very kind of overwhelming. But if you are sort of at the start of this journey, a really not good place to start is with self-compassion. So you start with compassion for yourself and then build on that, often with support. Like, you might actually need to speak to a counsellor or a psychologist or someone, a professional, to help you if you've had a particularly traumatic childhood, or you've had some very negative relationships. It might be helpful to get help. But you can start with compassion to yourself. That's something you can start with now. And if you're looking into doing some more self-compassion, I highly recommend the work of both Kristin Neff and Tara Brach. Both are really experienced researchers who have focused on that aspect of compassion, and particularly compassion for self. And they have amazing tools to help you to build your capacity for self-compassion. So check them out. They both have lots of resources available on their websites. But if you want to start with a simple practice, what you can do is, in those moments where you've stuffed up, you've done something wrong, or you can feel your inner critic starting to knock you down, is talk to yourself in the same way that you would if you had a dear friend who was in exactly the same situation, because it will be different. You know that if your friend did exactly the same thing that you've just done, your reaction and what you would tell them would be vastly different from what you'd say to yourself. We're always meaner to ourselves. And so use that. If you catch yourself, and we don't always, sometimes we'll go down that rabbit hole and not realize that we've done it. But most of the time we'll notice that what we're doing, we're being, we're kind of laying into ourselves. And just take a moment, take a breath, and then think about, what would I say to my friend if they had done this? And what you would do is you would acknowledge that it's a difficult situation. It's really hard. What you're going through is hard. You're doing the best that you can with what you've got. What's done is done, that you can't change it. You can make amends, and that would be, great, but you can't change what's already happened. All you can do is move forward. Like, it's much more positive, it's much more compassionate, and we can give that to ourselves. So give that a try. Try it for a week until our next catch up. And just anytime you catch yourself being unkind because you've done something, see if you can give yourself the compassion that you would give to a friend. And see how that changes how you show up for others. Because if we can be kind to ourselves, it gives us that ability to open our heart and to be kind to others. And people will respond to that with more love in return. It's a really lovely cycle. The more open you are, the kinder you are to yourself, the more open and kind you are with others, and then the more open and kind they are to you. So give it a try. Be kind to yourself. Be compassionate. And I will see you next week.